for another ASMR video. It's really good to see you again. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite places in the whole world, which is New York City. I spent a lot of time there and lived there for years as well. So today we're gonna look at a map of New York and talk about the fascinating history and culture of New York and its many neighborhoods. So, before we do that, let's go brew a cup of hot coffee with some steamed milk and maybe a spoonful of Nutella as well. So, let's go. And then we can take a look at the map and explore further. So, we're gonna go ahead and just wash our hands real fast and prepare ourselves for our cup of coffee. So, and now we're going to go ahead and fill up our tank of water so we can brew our coffee. And while this fills, we're gonna go ahead and steam our milk and drink our cup of coffee. So we're gonna go ahead and pour ourselves a cup of milk and then steam it using our coffee machine. I spilled a little milk there, but let's go ahead and take this So, I thought before we um, make our coffee, we could get a spoon of Nutella. And I also have this Biscoff with cookie butter as well. So let's go ahead and open these and get some sweets before we brew our cup. And let's get a spoon of Nutella as well. And I love the texture and the chocolatey hazelnut flavor of Nutella. It's a treat. And I believe it was founded sometime in the 40s by the Ferrero company. They did it's based in New York City. And lastly, we're going to go ahead and open our coffee so we can grind the beans and also steam our milk and brew a cup. So this is an Italian coffee. Illy is a fairly well-known brand as well. And it's a actually a classic Arabica blend, but it's very strong. It smells delicious. So let's go ahead and we can grind our beans and brew a hot cup, and then we can go ahead and also check out our map as well of New York City. Now I want you to listen to the sound of the water as it steams the coffee maker and drips slowly into the cup. It's a very full flavor that fills the air of coffee. Slowly and slowly. I just love the sound of the water just pouring into the cup. It just almost rings. After this finishes brewing, we'll pour in our milk. As you slowly fall to sleep. Alright, well, let's go and drink this cup of coffee and check out our map of New York. So, as you can see, this map is a couple 100 years old. Immediately, there's some differences. It's mostly just the southern tip of Manhattan. So, a couple 100 years ago, at this time, New York was just a small Dutch outpost, and the English and Dutch were battling for control. But let's take a closer look at this map and see what makes, how New York has changed so much. So, let's zoom in and see what we can find. I want you to close your eyes and lay back and imagine sailing into the New York Harbor. At this time, it was a lot different than what we know today. It was a lush green island with beautiful rivers and ponds. It was inhabited by different Native American tribes, but the first Europeans arrived in the 1500s. The French arrived and encountered the native Lenape tribe. However, it wasn't until 1600s, early 1600s, when Henry Hudson sailed up into the upper New York Bay, and, well, he was looking for a westerly passage to Asia like Columbus, but he found only beavers. At that time, beaver pelts were in fashion, and so the Dutch East India Company, which was one of the first sort of corporate entities from the Netherlands in the age of mercantilism. Anyway, they founded a Dutch colony and purchased Manhattan. It was that outpost up near Albany more, but they started to develop small outposts, and soon after that it was constructed into a fort. It was called New Amsterdam, but at that time it was Fort Amsterdam. It wasn't really till the mid-1600s when we run into our favorite New Yorker at that time, Peter Stuyvesant. And Peter Stuyvesant was inaugurated as the Director General around mid-1600s. And many of the names that we know today, such as Brooklyn, Harlem, which was Harlem, were named. The names were retained after the English took them. So, if you imagine New York as a fort, this is the southern tip of Manhattan. And one thing that's very interesting is the wall that you see surrounding the city and the fort at the southern tip. So this was mostly in the Wall Street area we know today. Something else that's quite interesting is outside of these walls was farmlands and those who dared to venture north, and also forest. Now, it wasn't till around this time that this was actually from the 1700s, the English. And you can actually see the ferry for Brooklyn. It was actually ran sort of near Grand Street. However, this was also the time of George Washington. It's from the 1700s, 1776. So, George Washington protected the city. One of the most interesting features of this map is the freshwater pond you see in the center. So, it's actually called, well, in the 1900s, Collect Pond. And I'm gonna come back to that in just a moment. But another interesting thing you see there is the Broadway Street, which is the oldest street. And something interesting about that street is it was used by Native American tribes, actually, going up the island. So this pond, however, collect pond, you can imagine a forest, and it's like a reservoir, but it was the freshwater source for the city. So you can imagine stately Americana homes and green grass fields and a lake or pond, big pond. Unfortunately, later on, the 1800s, in the industrial age, when factories were built close to or on the pond, so it's no longer with us. However, going back to this map, it's astounding how much things have changed. But the city still, the heart of it was always in the southern tip of it. You can even see the Long Island Ferry as well. So, looking at this, let's explore further and look at how New York looks today. So, we've seen New York, how it once looked, and it's almost unrecognizable from what we see today. But let's move forward a couple hundred years and let's look at a new map of the city and talk about some of the neighborhoods in New York and what makes each neighborhood in the city so unique. So let's get out the other map and take a look. Let's go ahead and take a look at this map, and we can compare it to what we saw before. As you can see, New York has grown quite a bit. There's Manhattan and Brooklyn, the Bronx. It's a very detailed map. So let's zoom in and explore a little bit further. Let's look a little bit more at New York City today. So after the Dutch and the English were expelled, the USA developed quite rapidly. New York was a gateway to the inner part of the country, Chicago and the Great Lakes. So it's quite dense, so let's just unpack what we're looking at here and try to make sense of it all. So this is Brooklyn that we're looking at right now. And as you can see, it's quite complex. And you can see here is Coney Island. Coney Island was very popular in the 20s and 30s, 40s, but today it's not quite the same that it once was. But my grandmother would always tell me stories about how going there and that would be just packed to the brim with people. So you can see the aquarium is over here and Jacob Reese Park. So let's move a little further up. So sort of Sheepshead Bay right here. And Midwood. And move a little bit further up north. And you can see here Crown Heights. And this is actually Prospect Park. And in this area is an area called Park Slope. Over towards this area here. This is the beginning of the East River. It's on the east side of Manhattan. And there's an area called Red Hook in here. So, in this area here, this is Crown Heights area, and tends to be a more Hasidim neighborhood. Let's go ahead and move up a little bit more. So you can start to see the island of Manhattan. And this is the Williamsburg Bridge. And you can see Williamsburg here, Prime Williamsburg. And if you go further over, you'll see it's Bushwick and also Greenpoint. And Greenpoint at one time was a farm. Brooklyn was its own city. However, the 5 boroughs united into New York City at a much later date. One thing you can see that is different about New York is a lot of the streets, well, especially Manhattan, is in straight lines. And so that was the grid plan in the 1800s. It was built like that purposely. And also, Williamsburg was once the one of the largest economies in the United States. It was the primary producer of sugar, early 1900s. Domino sugar factories somewhere around here. And Bushwick and Williamsburg were actually the same place, if you go back far enough. So, we can see the river here, Newtown Creek, and north of that is Long Island City. So, over in this area here is Sunnyside, Queens. And if we cross actually let's go into Brooklyn a little bit more. We're going into East New York, Howard Beach, and JFK Airport, which was actually built after LaGuardia, the other one. So over here is Inwood, Far Rockaway, over here as well. So you go further out here into Long Island, along here a couple hours, and you get to the Hamptons and other areas over there. And you can see, actually, let's go, we can see, go over to Manhattan. And you can see Manhattan is quite small. In fact, Queens and Brooklyn are much larger. So, down here, this is, I showed you on the map, it's the Wall Street area and the port. Also, to get to Staten Island, one takes the ferry from here. So you can see here, connects to Brooklyn, and back in the 1800s, the rich of Manhattan was very crowded, so even back then. And they moved into an area across the water down here. And this area is this area here. And it's known as Brooklyn Heights. And back in those days, there was no bridges, so people would cross these bridges here and take the ferry across to their mansions. So you can see here, coming along to the East River here, and the Hudson River goes along here, goes up towards Albany. And you can see New Jersey as well on the other side of the river, Weehawken. And Fort Lee up here. So this island here is Roosevelt Island. And Roosevelt Island was actually the Shutter Island with Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know if you've seen that, but the insane asylum and the leper colonies here, and also one of the first hospitals for infectious diseases was here as well. Now it's apartments and FDR memorial here at the southern tip of the island. Now if you come over here, you'll see the United Nations building is over here. And that was land that was actually I want to say a cattle factory of some sort, but it was donated by the Rockefellers back in that time. Of course, the original was going to be in San Francisco, but New York had to play its power card. So down in here is Washington Square Park, which is in the 1960s, was a home for the beatnik movement and the Greenwich Village, Eric Clapton, Jimi Hendrix generation. This park also was a public spot for a potter's field. And a potter's field is a place where they actually bury the dead. So there's actually 40,000 dead that are buried here. So moving along here, it was up at this time, Midtown, which is over here. It was they were farms back in a long time ago, but many New Yorkers moved. It wasn't the economic powerhouse it was today, or it is today. The rich would move up, slowly building their mansions up here. And you can see here is Central Park. And Central Park was actually man-made. So it didn't look like that before. It's not natural, which many people think. So we have the Bronx up here, and Harlem as well, and up in this area here, it's the old Little Italy and Arthur Avenue. Let's actually go back down to Manhattan for just a second. Here's another spot, the LaGuardia, which is right here. And I can see over here Flushing, Queens as well. And World's Fair was actually in this area. There's a monument, a ball that you can go see. And you can see the Fifth Avenue here. It's probably right here. It divides through Central Park here, the city, from the west side and the east side. So, over here, Carnegie Hall and corner of Central Park, Columbus Circle as well. These are in this area. We have Riverside Park. And as you can see, it sort of stops in this area here. One of the godfathers of New York City, Robert Moses, was not a fan of sharing his natural the parks with those sort of lower income houses, and he was a very controversial figure for New York. But he did build the Triborough Bridge and some of these other things that shaped the landscape here. Down over here is the Empire State Building, 34th Street. And Grand Central, 42nd Street, right here. And if you look over here, we have the Lower East Side and the East Village. Here's the Lower East Side, and here's the East Village. And that, of course, was all the same place at some point, but they just used for a marketing term, they changed the name there. We have Stuyvesant down here, the East Village. Over here is the Hell's Kitchen, sort of from 39th to 59th on 9th Avenue. Here it's Midtown East, this area here. And the Upper East Side, sort of more family area, but it goes all the way up into this area here. And it's home to many the famous cuisine as well. Daniel's restaurant is up in this area here. And at Central Park, east and west, there are a lot of beautiful buildings. Over here, the lower part of Central Park is the Bethesda Fountain. So, we have over here a lot of the Apollo Theater is here. To the jazz and blues music as well. So, you can imagine the swing era at this time in the 20s and 30s. New York was a magical place. Now over here, we have Times Square, which is named after the New York Times, and it used to be where the headquarters was. There. If we move a little bit further, right here is Madison, or where the Macy's is, excuse me, which was one of the first, not the first, but one of the larger, and one of the beginning department stores in the world as well. And over here, you can see all of the ports here. And Chelsea Piers is over here. And also along this area here, from 14th till just maybe a dozen or two blocks, there's the High Line, which is a beautiful raised walkway built on old railroad tracks. So in some of these areas here, some of these islands were used as potter fields as well. And in this area here, you can see Hart Island and City Island. And City Island is almost like a northeastern. It feels like a different city completely. Let's see Throg's Neck here. And this is the Long Island Sound. There's a lot of mansions going up north here. So, I know there's some spots we're missing here. Oh, Yankee Stadium is also over there in Manhattan somewhere as well. But this is sort of just the basic breakdown of New York City. And I hope that you are able to close your eyes and to relax. And I hope that that was a good beginning to understanding New York City. So, close your eyes. Imagine you're on a ride above the grand city of New York, looking down at the lights. And the greatest city as you slowly